Before I start, as always, I wish to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and to thank them for being on country. And I'd love to also acknowledge Auntie Ali and Auntie Joan this morning for their most gracious and wonderful welcome to country. Thank you. I must say in the introductory remarks when Charlene asked me to do a bit of a blurb about myself, that I did say I have a dip ed, but I chickened out. I see that's not reflected in there, but that's fine. But I did chicken out because it's a tough job, ain't it? It's a tough job teaching kids and especially high school students and all that. So I kind of opted out a bit, but I used those skills for a long, long time in terms of teaching at a university, as I did for many, many years in history and women's studies, Indigenous studies, all those sorts of things. So those skills really gave me, I guess, the fortitude to do exactly that. I'd also like to thank very much the New South Wales Teachers Federation, their executive, and to thank Charlene for organising and inviting me here today to speak to you all about what is a very burning issue, a soul-searching issue in our country, and that is the recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people within our Constitution. Now, what more important thing can we do since the apology and other good things that we've seen in our country, but to take it that next step forward in our history of 225 years of interaction, to be able to sit down and have these dialogues and this discussion. Please, people, I'm going to ask that you all spread the message to your families, to your communities, absolutely, to vote once again, as they did in 1967, yes, yes to be included in the Constitution of our great land. Thank you. And we know this is a great hope, a time of great hope and possibility for us all as Australians, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. A journey is underway, a journey with a winding path but a clear destination. Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the Constitution. It is a journey that resonates with the power both of symbolism and practical effect. It is a journey that calls on all of us as Australian people to step up for something very important. It is a relay across Australia, weaving its way through our homelands and our heartlands, gaining momentum as the promise of a fairer future for our nation is passed from hand to hand. This journey is a people's movement to finally recognise the rich and impressive history of Australia's unique Indigenous cultures in our founding document. It is a people's movement to finally banish the lingering stain of discrimination from our Constitution, such as the section that still states, and I quote, that the states can prohibit people from voting based on their race. So it's not only about Indigenous people in this country, it's everybody else who are not Anglo. It's a people's movement to ensure our Constitution catches up with our values, that reflects our better selves as a nation and our aspirations for a more equitable, prosperous future for all Australians. For this journey to recognition, it is important and an important opportunity for us to make history, to put right some of the injustices of the past, to say no more to exclusion and prejudice, to take the next step together as Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. When our Constitution was first drafted, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people weren't given a say, let alone a vote, in that whole process that forged it. The first Australians were effectively excluded from both its creation and its pages. The lawmakers of that era thought that the unique Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures of this land would in fact die out. Thankfully, those predictions were wrong. The truth is that every Indigenous child in this country is descended from some of the most resourceful and resilient people on the planet. Australia's true founding story is not the failure of a dying race, but the story of ingenuity, creativity, adaptation, and the survival in the face of great adversity. It's a positive story from which every Australian should draw inspiration and pride. But to this day, our Constitution is still silent on this story. On the tens of thousands of years before Federation in 1901, or before European arrival in 1788, not a single word yet testifies to the impressive Indigenous story of this land in the document that created this nation. It does not acknowledge the Indigenous history of this land, a history that enriches Australia today and helps us to define us to the world as unique. Our Constitution should really and truly reflect and inspire us. It is the foundation of our governmental and parliamentary structures. It is our highest document. It has been described as our nation's birth certificate. We need to repair what the opposition leader, Tony Abbott, referred to in Parliament this year as, and I quote, the stain on our soul as a nation, and what the former Prime Minister Julia Gillard has referred to as, and I quote, the unhealed wound that even now lies open at the heart of our national story. It is the next step in reconciling our past, and quite simply put, it is the right thing to do. Acknowledging that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were here for tens of thousands of years before Federation is indeed the right thing to do. Honouring the cultural and collective contributions that Indigenous Australians have made to our modern nation is the right thing to do, and seizing the opportunity of bipartisanship support at a federal level of a clear framework and a simple goal, ensuring that this moment in history is not lost, is the right thing to do. So now it is our turn to act. Our governments and legal system have gone some way to acknowledging historical injustices against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The apologies to the stolen generations, the Mabo decision. That's to name a few. But this moment is very, very different. To truly move forward as a nation, to acknowledge the injustices of the past, and to mend the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, this work is ours. The Australian Constitution is something we should all feel ownership over as Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, something we should all feel invested in. This is our journey together. All of us may play a part in advocating, explaining and encouraging this change, for it is not an easy task. We require a double majority to have a successful referendum, a majority of people voting yes nationally, plus a majority in 4 of the 6 states. Referendums can see 60% of the Australian population support a proposal but still fail to get that double majority. Therefore, we need an overwhelming yes to ensure success, just as we need an overwhelming yes for this referendum to carry the meaning that is required to heal our nation. Success will only be guaranteed if the people's movement continues to grow, building support, one conversation at a time. We should take heart from the 1967 referendum campaigners. For a decade, they travelled the country with meagre resources, talking to Australians about why Indigenous people should be included in the national census and that the Commonwealth Government should be able to make laws on behalf of us and them. This was, and still is, Australia's most successful referendum. More than 90% of Australians voted yes to remove from the highest legal document 2 pieces of discrimination against the Aboriginal race. And it was brought about one conversation at a time. And certainly I was a campaigner, an 11-year-old campaigner, at the time of the 1967 referendum in Brisbane with my mother on the streets, handing out these little badges that said yes. And some of you may have seen it. Now, African-American author Toni Morrison has said there is a defining moment in your life when you know you were black. That was probably around the defining moment when I knew I was black. My mother had always told me, but I believe the teacher at school who stood me up one day and he said, "We're doing a history lesson, stand up all the Australians." We all stood up. I have to sadly say that some of the Murray kids wagged that day. I should have gone with them. But I stayed in class because I was one of those kids that wanted to achieve academically. The very beautiful thing was he asked everyone to sit down in the class except me. As I stood up, I thought, what's he getting at? What's Mr. East doing? He was this lovely young teacher, fresh out of Teachers College, and he said, "I want you to acknowledge that this is a first Australian." Now, this was way back in the 60s. I was in grade 3 at the time, 6, 7, 8 years of age. And he did a whole history lesson about how all of us, well, all the rest of the class, had come to Australia, but we were here first. So that day I raced home and I told my mother, "Guess what, I'm an Aborigine." She said, "I've been trying to tell you that all your life, darling." She said, "You believe it from a white man, but your teacher, not from me." So those 2 moments in my life, especially from Mr. East in grade 3, at a school in Inala in Brisbane, Surbiton State School, was my first great revelation that I was black. And with this one, with Toni Morrison, her quote came back to me after many years. It was about standing on the street corner handing out these badges. What a time. So, people, it's time now for our generation to have those conversations that need to be had to take the next important and long step that's very much overdue. To have a statement of positive recognition of Indigenous Australians placed in our Constitution and to remove the discrimination from it. And you can be part of this, part of helping to bring about a positive change and helping to make history by signing up at recognise.org.au, by talking to family and friends and colleagues about why this matters, by wearing the R badge and speaking up about why, and by taking action where you can. It is our task to grasp the significance of the potential of this moment. It is our task to reassure and educate those who are nervous or indifferent about changing our Constitution to recognise Indigenous Australians. And it is our task to dispense with the all too pervasive myth that says that symbolic and practical measures are somehow mutually exclusive. For some who will dismiss constitutional change as mere symbolism, they will stay with that and say it won't change a thing, won't educate a single child, won't create a single job, and won't improve health, life expectancy and living standards. That's not only besides the point, it's plain wrong. Symbolic statements not only have intrinsic worth, they remind us of our duties and obligations to each other. Look at the apology and the Redfern speech. We can and should do both practical and symbolic at the same time. It's not about choice between having a constitution that recognises us or faster gains in closing the gap. One helps the other. As Patrick Dodson has said, if we face our history with courage, and if we pledge the integrity of improving relationships firmly within our Constitution, then a real dialogue can be created that we can proceed secure in the knowledge of our shared commitment to the nation and to its future. As true citizens of this country, properly acknowledged in our Constitution, we can only look forward not only to improving our own lot, but helping Australia contribute to the well-being of the world's people. It is time to step up and support this journey to recognition. It is time to face our history with courage and dignity, to have a real conversation and dialogue between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians that will leave a legacy of a democracy that is fairer, more honest and more inspiring, and one that is full of pride for all Australians. This, my friends, is our journey. It is our Constitution, our history, our vote and our future. Let's make it count. Wurrumuli. Thank you.